on stage, part of the
Part of the,
conversation?
no, not,
Right, that's the problem, that's why we're here.
right, well,
We actually think that this conversation is crucial and necessary, but we don't think that there was a good representation of people who are working here locally in Hartford and in Connecticut to be invited up on the stage to take part in that conversation. There's nobody on that stage who's actively involved in the Black Lives Matters movement as part of that conversation. We wanted to draw attention to that. We don't think you can have a meaningful conversation about the state of race and racism in America, in Connecticut, or in the greater Hartford area without talking about Black Lives Matters.
do you feel that by disrupting this performance, this conversation, that you achieved something?
Well, people are now going to be thinking about Black Lives Matters, and when they leave here, hopefully they'll take up that invitation to not just have conversation, but to move to action. Because as we pointed out in there, the conversation that they're having is crucial and necessary and vital. However, conversation alone does not create the kind of systemic level change that we need. This conversation is not going to bring back the Black lives that have been lost to police brutality. It's not going to bring prosperity into the Black communities like those here in Hartford that are drowning in poverty that is the direct result of an economic system built on white supremacy. So we want to invite everybody that's here tonight to not only talk, but to move to action. We need everybody to come together, and we cannot have the people in there think that tonight should be or can be their only, one and only contribution to liberating people of color, actually not even just people of color, all of us, every single one of us from the evils of white supremacy.
And there are people who are doing that work right now in Hartford, and they're
Yes.
not on stage.
Yes. And there are actually people who are doing that nationally. There are national level leaders who are doing that work, and they're not on stage. We have representation from the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is an amazing, venerable, fine institution, but they're not the people that are in the streets. They're not the people that are camping out outside the 4th precinct in Minneapolis. They're not the people who are shutting down Chicago because of the police murder of Laquan McDonald. They're not the people who are in Ferguson being tear gassed and having bullets shot at them for protesting. I mean, I think Jessica Williams is amazing and great, and I would love to stay and hear her speak some more, but she's a comedian. She has very pointed and savvy social and political commentary in her comedy, but she's not out there doing this same kind of work, and we need to have representation of those voices on that stage as another layer about moving that from just talk into action. I think that this is a good introduction for people who haven't really been exposed to a lot of this thinking before and are wondering, well, what can I do next? But we can't have people walking out of here tonight thinking that this is all they can do, that this is all they're empowered to do.
Absolutely, and what this forum is intended to be is a platform for many more community conversations here locally involving Black Lives Matter and many other organizations who are working on the streets to effect positive change. So
We
everything
understand
that
that.
you said, we hear you. Disrupting tonight, it makes it hard to hear your very eloquent message.
Well, without disruption, people aren't listening because people have been saying these things for years, and it wasn't until protesters and activists decided to be disruptive that people started listening.
Well, we
People
love
in
you to be
positions
part of
power.
our effort to help everyone continue these conversations locally.
Why don't you invite them up on stage to be a part of the conversation? I mean, if you really want that, then you should invite them to be a part of the
We
conversation.
can also think about, if there are people who came to the forum tonight, I noticed on your website that there are lots of resources for people who want to have more dialogue around action and for people who want to start community conversations around action. I'm around racism, but there's not a lot of information there for people who want to move to action, for people who want to move to actual action. So that can be a point
And
to start at as well.
I mean, it's just not the dialogue, it's also about the change. What comes of this conversation? Nothing.
What comes of this conversation, we hope, are many more conversations. And if you
I'm
are
talking
part
about
of, but if
policies
you are
and
part of
practice.
those conversations that can lead to policy changes and other actions, then we're all working in the same direction.
Well, I think that this conversation is a good platform for people as individuals to start thinking about how can I create some individual level change within myself?
Yes.
How can I shift my perspective and thinking? again, we can't have people walking out of here thinking that just because they personally have changed, that that's going to create any kind of cultural or social shift, because policies and systems still remain intact.
Exactly.
So what we need people to understand and to recognize is that this conversation is a catalyst for them to become politicized and absorbed into this issue. But then when they leave here, they need to move to action. They can't just take this great conversation and go home and think, oh, I'm enlightened, I'm a changed person. Because that doesn't actually change the conditions that many people in this country, people of color, are suffering under.
Well, maybe you can help us identify how to move the internal change to action.
We would love to do that.
Okay.
We would love to do that. And
Great.
it's my understanding that that kind of conversation has been broached before, not only here with this community, but in other communities. And you said, why be disruptive? It's because oftentimes we don't get an opportunity to have this conversation that you and I just had, this really awesome conversation, until we are disruptive. Until we are disruptive. Because being disruptive doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing something bad. We're trying to achieve justice, and justice and peacefulness are not the same thing. We're nonviolent, but we're not always peaceful, because sometimes we need to be disruptive to have our voices heard.
Yep, I hear you. I hear you. I'm sorry that you can't stay for the rest of the evening, but do, you know, I can give you my card.
Please do.
Do reach out, and we'd love to continue
I
conversations
will. I'll
with
show
you.
up, but not with the megaphone.
Thank you.